Last night, I was scrolling through the latest dating trend reports. You know, the ones claiming 2026 is the year of deep dating and that being a nerd is finally the peak of sexiness. It's framed as this beautiful collective awakening where we're all finally looking for soulful connections instead of just swiping on a jawline. On the surface, it looks like a return to human virtue. But as I watched these interviews with self-proclaimed intentional daters, something felt off. There was this one woman glowing as she described her checklist for emotional depth. She wasn't talking about love, she was talking about a high-threshold screening process. She wanted vulnerability, but specifically the kind that signaled he had the time, the cognitive surplus, and the stability to act as her personal emotional handyman. She spoke about authenticity with the cold precision of a recruiter hiring for a high-stress corporate role. It reminded me of the way people talk about gold when a currency collapses. When digital allure is hyperinflated by AI filters and curated lies to the point of being worthless, the market doesn't just stop, it changes its currency. The sexy nerd isn't a sudden appreciation for comic books. It's a survival algorithm. In an unpredictable world, a nerd is a proxy for predictable provisioning and low defection risk. This isn't a depth revolution, it's the bankruptcy liquidation of a popped bubble. We are witnessing the rise of a new sexual Gini coefficient where emotional labor is the priciest ticket in town, and if you can't pay it, you're rendered invisible. The question we have to ask is this a search for connection, or is it just the most sophisticated firewall ever built to keep the bottom 80% out? When you strip away the moralistic gloss, what's left isn't a romance. It's a high-stakes hedge against a chaotic era. And if you're a man entering this market, you aren't being asked for your heart. You're being assessed as a biological insurance policy.
That's a pretty bleak picture to paint of romance in 2026.
It feels bleak, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you look at the actual data we have on the table for today's deep dive, especially from the last quarter of 2025, it's really hard to argue with that assessment. You use the term bankruptcy liquidation.
Yeah. And
that implies a total crash, right? A complete loss of faith in the old currency.
That's what it feels like. I mean, look at the research we've pulled together. We've got these dense sociological studies on birth rates just plummeting. We have game theory papers on swiping algorithms, and then these really dark but fascinating threads from sort of the digital underground. And it all points to the same thing. The fun of dating, the spontaneity, it's all been replaced by this almost industrial high-stakes economic calculation.
Well, that's what happens when a market fails. What we're analyzing today is a market failure.
Right.
This isn't just about, bad dates or who should text first. We really need to unpack the deep mechanics of why the system is broken.
Okay. Yeah.
First, we need to really dig into that sexual Gini coefficient you mentioned. Then we need to look at honest signaling and why this idea of emotional labor has become the new gold standard.
Okay.
And then finally, we have to look at the response to all this, which is this rise of what people are calling monk mode.
Okay, before we dive into the Gini coefficient, which sounds, a bit intimidating, I want to ground this in a human story. Because market failure can sound so abstract, like it's something happening on a spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah, it's easy to forget the human cost.
Exactly. For the people living through it, it just feels like exhaustion or, constant rejection. I heard this story about a guy in London, we can call him Arthur, and his experience really stuck with me because he wasn't like an edge case. He was the prototype, the good guy who did everything he was told to do.
This is the London metro area case study, right? From the report on long-term user behavior.
That's the one. So Arthur is, I think, 32. And he spent the last 3 years, literally 3 years, perfecting what he called his digital mask.
Digital mask? Wow.
Yeah. He was treating his own life like a product launch, hitting the gym 4 times a week, not because he loved it, but specifically to get the right kind of photo.
To get that V-taper.
Exactly. He even hired a photographer to get those shots that look candid, but are totally staged.
Yeah. The laughing at a salad photo.
The very same. He curated this entire lifestyle, online hiking trips, cooking classes, the whole 9 yards.
So he was optimizing his profile for maximum conversion.
Yeah.
He was basically treating his identity like a marketing funnel.
And on paper, it worked. I mean, he did everything right. He's stable, has a good job, he's well-groomed. But he found himself in this just bizarrely exhausting loop. He'd get matches, but the cost of keeping their attention was astronomical. He called it resource deflation. He would spend hours writing these really thoughtful messages, planning these elaborate first dates, being this high-level emotional support system, only to get ghosted the second he let the performance slip.
So his effort was basically being commoditized. In a functioning market, that kind of effort gives you a return.
Right.
But in his market, that effort was just the price of admission to stand in the lobby.
He said it felt like a job interview for a role he didn't even want anymore. He told the researcher, "I realized I was trading my soul for crumbs of validation." And that's the part that really haunts me. Arthur wasn't failing because he was a bad guy. He was failing because his sincere efforts, his kindness, his time, it had all become cheap currency in a market of hyperinflation. He was just invisible.
And Arthur is the perfect illustration of what happens when that Gini coefficient gets out of whack.
Okay.
See, Arthur probably thinks his problem is his profile or his text game, or that he's just not charming enough. But his problem isn't personal. It's macroeconomic. He's a victim of inequality.
So let's pivot to that, because when I hear Gini coefficient, I think of wealth inequality, right? The gap between the ultra-rich and everyone else. How does that apply to Arthur getting ghosted in London?
It's the exact same mathematical principle, just. You're applying it to a different resource. The Gini coefficient is just a number, a score from 0 to 1, that measures how evenly something is distributed.
Okay.
A score of 0 is perfect equality. Everyone has the exact same amount of money, or in this case, the same amount of romantic attention. A score of 1 is perfect inequality. One person has everything, and everyone else has absolutely nothing.
So in economics, what's a bad score?
In economics, a Gini of around 0.4 is considered pretty unequal. If you hit 0.6, you're looking at a failed state. You literally have riots in the streets because the system is so unstable.
Okay. So what are the numbers in the dating world?
Well, in the pre-digital era, think of a small town or a local community. The mating Gini was probably quite low. Most people found someone. There was natural cap on the inequality because you could only compete with the guys in your town.
Right. Your options were limited by geography.
But dating apps remove that cap. They've globalized the market, and that creates a winner-take-all dynamic. The latest data we have suggests that on the major platforms, the sexual Gini coefficient is approaching 0.8.
0.8.
In some demographics, it might even be higher.
That's higher than the wealth inequality in the most unequal countries on Earth. That's not a market. That's a feudal system.
It's a concentration of resources that is fundamentally unstable. We're seeing a skew where something like the top 5 to 10% of men are receiving 80 to 90% of all the initial female interest.
The 80-20 rule on steroids.
On every steroid imaginable.
Yeah.
And so for a guy like Arthur, who let's say is objectively in the top 30% of men, he's a good guy, has his life together. In a normal world, he'd be doing just fine.
But in this world, with a Gini of 0.8.
He's mathematically invisible. He's statistical noise. And this is driven by what I've started calling the digital mirror effect. Think about the average woman Arthur is trying to match with. In a small town, Arthur's a great option. He's one of the best choices on the block. But on her phone, the algorithm isn't showing her the block.
It's showing her the whole world.
It's showing her the top 0.1% of men globally. It's constructing this digital sexual superstructure that completely warps her sense of reality.
It creates a phantom status.
A phantom status or a validation loophole. An average woman is getting DMs and likes from a global pool of men, many of whom are just swiping on everyone. But her brain interprets that as genuine market value. She believes her options are nearly infinite.
So it massively inflates her reservation price, right? The minimum she's willing to accept.
Exactly. She isn't judging Arthur against the guy at the local pub. She's judging him against a curated, photoshopped phantom of global perfection that she sees on her screen. And this leads to what economists call a liquidity trap.
The market just seizes up.
It freezes. The bottom 80% of men face this sexual resource deflation you talked about. No matter what they do, the price of admission just keeps rising. Meanwhile, the top few guys have an attention monopoly. But here, those women aren't actually pairing off long-term with that top 5%. Because those men have infinite options and a very high incentive to defect. They don't settle down. So you end up with a lot of lonely people at the bottom and a lot of frustrated, churned through people in the middle and at the top.
And this isn't just about, people having lonely Saturdays. We have to zoom out here because the stakes are actually civilizational.
If you connect this dynamic to the bigger picture, you have to look at the demographic crisis.
The fertility rates.
We've got Mads Larsen's data here, and the numbers are, frankly, terrifying if you care all about societal continuity.
Yeah.
Norway's fertility rate is down to 1.4.
And just for context, the replacement rate, what you need just to keep the population stable, is 2.1.
Correct. So at 1.4, you are losing a third of your population every single generation. It's a demographic waterfall. And it gets much worse. South Korea is at 0.7.
0.7. That's an existential threat. A society can't survive that.
And Larson's core argument is that this isn't just about the cost of housing or childcare, which is what you always hear from politicians.
Oh, he says that's a secondary factor.
The primary driver, the main bottleneck, is the sheer difficulty people are having in finding a partner in the first place. It's a broken market mechanic. If the sexual Gini coefficient is too high, people just can't pair bond.
It creates a trust vacuum, too. When dating becomes this high-stakes hedge against chaos, paranoia replaces romance. You're not looking for a partner. You're looking for the scam.
Exactly. And that lack of trust just shreds the social fabric. If people cannot form stable pairs, societies disappear. The dating market isn't a sideshow. It's the engine room of civilization. And right now, that engine is seizing.
Wow. If the market is this broken, how are people trying to navigate it? And this leads us to emotional labor, which has become such a huge buzzword in 2026. It's not just about being nice anymore, it's a currency.
It is a currency, and it's being used as a signal. In a market this noisy, you need a very, very loud signal.
I was reading this thread online. It was an anecdote about a woman in Seattle. Let's call her Sarah. And she just perfectly, if accidentally, illustrated this brutal dynamic.
Okay.
Sarah is smart, she's successful, works in tech, and she had developed this system for dating. She called it high-threshold emotional screening.
High-threshold emotional.
It means she demanded what she called long-form vulnerability and consistent emotional labor from men before she'd even agree to a second date.
Long form. So she wanted, like, deep trauma backstories on date one.
In her mind, she was filtering for authenticity. She was looking for a soulmate. But if you look at it from an economic perspective, what she was actually doing was a high-stakes risk transfer strategy.
She was lowering her own cost of exit while maximizing the man's cost of commitment.
Exactly. She was asking for a huge, non-refundable deposit.
Oh.
And there was this one guy, a software engineer, who really fell for her. He spent weeks navigating her very complex emotional demands. He listened to all her anxieties, shared his own vulnerabilities. He put in the work. He was the emotional handyman for my opening monologue.
He was paying the price of admission.
He paid it in full. And then the second, a better option appeared on her app, a guy with slightly higher status markers, a better curated profile. She just pivoted, dropped the engineer instantly.
Brutal. But from a purely rational standpoint, you can see the logic.
Completely. But the engineer was just devastated. He felt used. And looking at it through this lens, Sarah wasn't really looking for love, was she? She was running a stress test. She was using sincerity as a screening tool.
Her story is incredible because it is a textbook example of signaling theory. This is a concept from economics from Michael Spence that actually won him a Nobel Prize.
Okay, so connect the dots for us. How does Nobel Prize-winning economics explain Sarah ghosting this poor engineer in Seattle?
Well, Spence's idea was about markets full of lemons.
Like the used car term, the car that looks great but the engine is broken?
Exactly. In the used car market, all the cars look shiny, but some are lemons. In the dating market, a lemon is a guy who seems charming and successful, but is actually volatile, or a liar, or is just looking for a casual hookup when he says he wants a relationship.
Right.
The problem is, both the good guys and the lemons can say the same things. I'm looking for something serious. I really like you.
So it's a worthless signal.
It's worthless in a high-risk market. To tell them apart, you need a signal that is too expensive for the lemon to fake. This is what's known as costly signaling theory.
Give me an example.
The classic example is a peacock's tail. It's huge, it's heavy, colorful, it makes it hard to fly, and it attracts predators. A weak, unhealthy peacock literally cannot afford the resources to grow and maintain a big tail.
So a big tail is an honest signal of genetic fitness. The cost is the point.
The cost is the point. So for Sarah, the vulnerability and the emotional labor she demands, that's the peacock's tail.
Okay.
Sustaining deep conversation, processing someone else's complex trauma responses, that consumes a massive amount of time and cognitive surplus. Time is the one resource you cannot fake.
Right.
So only a man who has, let's call it resource abundance, he's emotionally stable, he's safe, his life is in order, can afford to waste hours being an unpaid therapist without an immediate payoff.
So the lemon, the player, he won't do it.
It's not profitable for him. His strategy is based on a quick return on investment. He's not going to put in 40 hours of emotional work for a chance at a second date. It's too expensive. So Sarah is using vulnerability not because she wants a deep connection right then, but because it proves he has the stability and resources to provide one. It's an honest signal.
This completely reframes the whole sexy nerd trend. of 2026. I just thought it was, because some famous actors started building PCs and everyone decided glasses were cool.
Well, that might be part of it, but it goes deeper. The nerd archetype is so appealing right now because it signals predictable provisioning and low defection risk.
Safety.
It's all about safety. In a chaotic world, the nerd is a safe bet. He's statistically less likely to have a ton of other options, so his risk of cheating is lower. And he usually has the cognitive surplus to handle these deep dating demands because his time isn't being spent on, nightlife and chasing other women.
It's a survival algorithm. It's so unromantic when you break it down, but it makes perfect logical sense. It actually reminds me of a study I read, the Ardinger study on entrepreneurs.
On strategic uncertainty taking, yeah.
That's the one. It found that entrepreneurs use emotion as a strategic tool in negotiations to get better concessions. And it feels like that's what's happening here. Vulnerability is being used as a negotiation.
It's a strategic transfer of risk. When a woman demands a man open up about his deepest fears on date one, she is essentially demanding he prove his stability by absorbing her emotional volatility. He has to act as her insurance policy. She pays nothing up front. He pays everything in emotional currency.
And the cost of that is market inefficiency.
Exactly. When the tax on dating gets too high, when you have to perform endless hours of emotional labor with no guarantee of a return, like the engineer rational actors just stop playing the game.
They burn out, which isn't just an individual feeling, it's a systemic failure. And this is where it gets really interesting because we can model this whole mess using game theory.
Right. We often say dating is a game, but in this case, it's literally a game that can be modeled.
Yeah.
Specifically as a prisoner's dilemma.
Okay, walk us through this. How are we all prisoners on our own phones?
Well, in this model, the dating pool is a shared resource, like a common pasture for grazing sheep. The best outcome for everyone, what we call cooperation, is if both men and women swipe selectively and engage honestly.
The signal-to-noise ratio would be perfect.
But that's not what happens. Both sides defect. The rational individual strategy for a man, because his match probability is so low, is to cast the widest net possible. Swipe right on everyone, filter later.
A numbers game.
Which then floods the women's inboxes with thousands of low-quality likes.
Right.
So the rational individual strategy for a woman becomes extreme selectivity. She has to filter aggressively, or she just gets overwhelmed and ignores the app. And this leads to something called a Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium is a state in a game where no single player can improve their outcome by changing their strategy, assuming the other player's strategies remain unchanged.
So everyone's stuck.
Everyone is stuck. If the guy stops spam swiping, he gets 0 matches. If the woman stops filtering so hard, she gets harassed into oblivion. Everyone is doing what's best for themselves, but the collective result is what we call a tragedy of the commons.
The sheep eat all the grass and then everyone starves.
Exactly. The individual rational strategies destroy the ecosystem for the group. The men get no matches, the women get buried in noise, everyone loses.
Everyone. There's a third player in this game that is definitely not losing.
The house always wins.
I was reading Kyla's newsletter about this. She calls it the monetization of loneliness. And her point is so sharp. The business model of these dating apps, like Match Group or Bumble, requires you to stay single.
It's a fundamental conflict of interest. A perfectly efficient dating app that found everyone a partner in a week would go bankrupt in a month.
Right. Kyla calls it the convenience contradiction. We've been trained by Uber and Amazon to believe that everything should be easy, on demand. So when love turns out to be hard and expensive and requires this massive emotional tax, we just give up.
And we are seeing that giving up happen in real time, especially with the younger generations. Gen V.
Yeah, the data is clear. They're rejecting this freemium for love model. They're not paying, and increasingly they're not even dating. They're just opting out.
Cool. If the bottom 80% can't compete in a market with a Gini of 0.8 and the game itself is rigged by the platform, well, the only winning move is not to play.
And that leads directly to the most controversial, but maybe the most logical trend we're seeing in 2026, the strategic withdrawal.
Monk mode.
I want you to picture this guy, Leo.
Yeah.
He's, say, 27, living in a small apartment in Berlin, works in logistics, and he used to spend every evening doing the same thing, swiping, going on these mediocre dates, feeling this constant low-grade hum of anxiety.
A standard experience.
Standard experience. But one day, he just stopped. He deleted the apps. He turned off the notifications. He entered what the online world calls monk mode. And for him, this wasn't an act of anger or bitterness. He wasn't sitting in the dark hating women.
It was a strategic choice.
It was a strategic withdrawal. He called it his non-cooperative game theory solution to a market he decided was high cost and low return.
He ran the numbers and cut his losses.
Exactly. And he shifted his focus to what he called his competence hierarchies. He started going to the gym not for the photos, but for the actual feeling of getting stronger. He doubled down on his career. He started reading philosophy. He said his testosterone felt leveled out for the first time in years because he wasn't chasing these digital dopamine hits all the time.
Leo's approach is so interesting because it's not just a social decision. It's a physiological intervention. We have to look at the neuroscience of what's happening.
The dopamine detox.
That's the start of it. Yeah. Our brains are wired for reward, and dating apps hijack that system perfectly. It's a slot machine. Intermittent reinforcement. You swipe, nothing. Swipe, nothing. Swipe, MSCH. That hit of dopamine is incredibly addictive. It keeps you pulling the lever.
And Leo cut the...
He did. And by doing that, he starts a physiological reset. His baseline cortisol, his stress hormone goes down. His dopamine receptors start to stabilize. But there's another more powerful layer here. It's called the winner effect.
Concept.
The winner effect is a biological phenomenon. When an animal wins a contest, even a small one, it gets a surge in testosterone and a change in its brain chemistry that makes it more likely to win the next contest.
So success breeds success chemically.
Chemically, by shifting his focus away from the rigged dating market where he was constantly losing, being rejected, ignored, to these competence hierarchies like his job or the gym.
Where the feedback is direct and objective. You either lift the weight or you don't.
Exactly. He starts winning these small objective battles every single day. He's triggering that hormonal boost from genuine earned competence rather than begging for it from external validation. He is chemically re-engineering himself.
But society's reaction to this, it's not positive.
Oh, it's deeply hostile.
When men like Leo choose to opt out, the labels start flying. And, we need to be neutral here and just report on what's happening, but you see terms like incel or MGTOW used as insults.
Absolutely. The JMU paper on virtual manhood acts analyzes how these online spaces are often framed as hotbeds of misogyny and danger. And to be clear, some of them are. There is real anger and darkness in those corners.
But Leo isn't angry. He's just indifferent.
And that is the distinction that society seems unable or unwilling to make. The research often conflates strategic withdrawal with hatred, but from a pure game theory perspective, what Leo is doing is the most rational move possible. It's self-preservation.
So why does it trigger such a visceral negative reaction? If a guy just wants to focus on his work and go to the gym, why is that threatening to people?
Because the entire social and reproductive system, as Larson points out, relies on mass male participation. It relies on men competing for female attention. It relies on that transfer of resources, time, and energy. When a significant portion of men, potentially that entire bottom 80%, decides to defect from the game entirely, the whole equilibrium is threatened.
It's like a capital strike, but the capital is male attention.
In this environment, stoic indifference becomes a form of armor. In an era of chaos, your attention is your only real asset. Withdrawing it is the ultimate expression of power. It's a refusal to pay the emotional labor tax.
Yes, I mean, we've gone from the macro level Gini coefficient, this massive inequality. We've gone down to the microeconomics of Sarah and the high cost of emotional signaling. We've looked at the broken game theory of the apps, and we've landed here with monk mode.
It leaves us in a state of painful transition. The deep dating trend of 2026, the one you opened with, it isn't a solution. It's a symptom. It's the bankruptcy liquidation of that popped bubble.
Right.
The old currency, superficial attraction, is now worthless because of AI and filters. The new currency, deep emotional labor, is too expensive for most men to pay, and it's too risky for women to trust anyone who can't pay it.
So everyone is just scrambling for safe assets.
They're looking for stability, for time, for their own sanity. And for a growing number of people, the safest asset they can find is simply their own solitude.
It's a very sobering thought. We usually try to end these deep dives with some kind of practical takeaway, but today it feels like the takeaway is just recognition, recognizing the nature of the game you're in.
And recognizing that you have the choice to set your own rules. You don't have to play a rigged game.
Yeah.
You can decide to build your own table.
From Arthur in London to Sarah in Seattle and Leo in Berlin. And these aren't just stories, right? They're signal flares from a society that's trying to figure out how to connect when the bridge has been broken by the algorithms.
And as we move through 2026, I think we're going to see this polarization just increase. The demands for deep dating will get even stricter.
Which means the sexual Gini coefficient will likely stretch even further.
Well, until maybe the system finally breaks and something new emerges. But we're a long way from that.
No, we certainly are not there yet. But we wanted to leave you with something that takes this whole idea of opting out and elevates it beyond just a dating strategy.
Right. It's about looking at it through a much wider lens.
Viewing this through the lens of civilizational cyclicality, the decision to opt out of the deep dating game transcends personal strategy. It becomes an individual act of resistance against the emotional depletion demanded by a decaying social order. The path forward is not to play a better hand within their rigged game, but to build a new table entirely, governed by your own metrics of value. The ultimate algorithm is cold but clear. She does not want your depth, she wants the residual warmth of your strength. Nature does not empathize, it only selects. Your task is to ensure you are among the selected, not by her fleeting standards, but by the immutable laws of resilience and power.
A powerful place to end.
Okay.
Until next time.